The cabin was already full of noise before anything went wrong. Not loud noise, not chaos, just the restless, irritated sound of people trapped together before motion. Overhead bins slammed shut. Seat belts clicked. A baby cried 3 rows back, the sound thin and tired, like it had already cried too much today. The air smelled faintly of recycled oxygen and coffee that had gone cold. The plane hadn't moved yet. That was the problem. Row 18 sat directly over the wing, not close enough to feel important, not far enough to disappear. Marcus and Aisha Johnson sat there with their 2 children wedged between them. Knees touching, arms carefully arranged so no one felt crowded. Marcus had his hand raised. Not high, not aggressive, just enough to be seen. "I'm sorry," he said when the flight attendant stopped beside their row. "We've been sitting for a while. Can you tell us what the delay is?" His voice was calm, almost apologetic. The flight attendant didn't answer right away. She was tall, blonde hair pulled tight beneath her cap, posture stiff with authority. She glanced at Marcus's hand like it offended her, then looked past him, down the aisle, as if searching for something more important. "We're waiting," she said flatly. "Waiting for what?" Aisha asked gently, bouncing their youngest on her knee. The baby's cheeks were flushed, eyes glassy with exhaustion. The attendant's gaze snapped to her. "Sit back," she said, "and keep your voice down." Marcus frowned. "We weren't raising our voices." Several heads turned. The attendant leaned closer, lowering her voice but sharpening it. "You're delaying boarding with questions. Everyone else is waiting quietly." "That's not true," Marcus said. "Other people have asked." She ignored that. Behind them, a man muttered, "Just sit down." Aisha felt her chest tighten. The baby whimpered louder, sensing the shift. Their older child, Jamor, clutched the armrest, eyes flicking between adults, absorbing tension without understanding it. Marcus exhaled slowly. He had promised himself before the trip that he wouldn't escalate anything. Vacations were supposed to be easier than this no-mo. "Okay," he said. "We're just asking for information." The flight attendant straightened. "If you're unhappy," she said loudly now, "you're free to leave the aircraft." The cabin went quiet. Aisha stared at her. "Leave? Why would we leave?" "Because you're being disruptive," the attendant said. Marcus laughed once, incredulous. "Disruptive? We're sitting." The attendant's eyes hardened. "I can call security," she said. "Right now." A yellow arrow might as well have pointed at them. Every eye in the cabin was on row 18. Aisha felt heat crawl up her neck. "Please," she said. "Our baby is tired. We just want to know what's happening." The attendant stepped back into the aisle, voice rising. "This is your final warning," she said. "Leave or I'll call security." Marcus felt something snap. "No," he said. Not loudly, not angrily, just firm. "We're not moving." The words hung in the air. Someone gasped. The attendant's jaw clenched. She turned sharply and walked toward the front of the plane. Aisha's heart pounded. "Makash," she whispered. "What did you do?" "What?" he whispered back. "Ask a question." Minutes passed. Too many. Whispers rippled through the cabin. Phones were raised and lowered again, indecision flickering across faces. Then the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated." Footsteps followed. 2 security officers boarded. The aisle felt suddenly too narrow. They stopped at row 18. "Yes," Marcus said, forcing his voice steady. The attendant stood behind them, arms crossed. "These passengers are refusing to comply," she said. "With what?" one officer asked. "Crew instructions." Marcus looked at the officer. "Sir, we haven't broken any rules. We asked why the plane was delayed." The officer glanced at the attendant. "She feels threatened," the attendant said quickly. Aisha's mouth fell open. "Threatened? By us? With children?" The baby began to cry in earnest now, high and sharp. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. A man across the aisle shook his head. A woman near the window whispered, "This is ridiculous." The officer sighed. "Sir, ma'am, I'm going to ask you to gather your belongings." Marcus didn't move. "We paid for these seats," he said. "Our kids are buckled in. Refusal will escalate this," the officer warned. Jamal looked up at his father. "Daddy, are we in trouble?" Marcus's throat tightened. "No," he said softly. "We're not." But the world wasn't listening. The attendant smirked faintly, already victorious. Get them off, she said. Aisha stood slowly, holding the baby tight. Her hands were shaking. You're really doing this? She asked the officer. In front of everyone. He didn't answer. Passengers watched as the family gathered their bags. Some stared openly, others stared at the floor. As Marcus stepped into the aisle, someone clapped once, quiet, then stopped. The family walked off the plane in silence. The door closed behind them. Inside the cabin, the attendant exhaled sharply and turned away, satisfied. 7 minutes later, everything changed. The jet bridge echoed with hurried footsteps. Airport management arrived first. Then corporate representatives. Then someone from legal. And then a man in a dark suit. Phone still pressed to his ear. What do you mean they removed the family? He demanded. He stopped walking when he saw Marcus, Aisha, and the children sitting on a bench near the gate. His expression shifted. You? He said softly. Sir? Marcus looked up warily. I'm the regional operations director, the man said, and I just saw the video. Aisha's heart sank. What video? The man turned his phone around. The incident was everywhere already. Multiple angles. Clear audio. The attendant's voice. Leave or I'll call security. Get them off. Passengers speaking up afterward. One voice clear above the rest. They didn't do anything wrong. The director's jaw tightened. Come with me, he said. Back on the plane, the attendant froze as the director stepped on board. Where are they? He asked. They were removed, she said. Why? They refused to comply. With what instruction? He pressed. She hesitated. The silence answered for her. The director turned to the captain. Suspend boarding. Then he looked directly at the attendant. Step off the aircraft, he said. Her face flushed. Excuse me? Murmurs erupted. The attendant looked around, suddenly aware of how many eyes were watching. She followed him off. At the gate, the director knelt in front of Marcus and Aisha. I'm sorry, he said. This never should have happened. Marcus studied him. Are we getting back on the plane? Yes, the director said. With an apology, and with witnesses. When the family reboarded, the cabin felt different. Quieter, heavier. Passengers watched as the director spoke. This flight will not depart until I'm clear, he said. The family removed earlier is seated again because they did nothing wrong. Applause broke out, Rael this time, loud. Aisha felt tears spill down her cheeks. The attendant stood near the front, pale, arms at her sides. The director continued, We will be reviewing this incident fully. He turned to Marcus. Sir, thank you for your patience. Marcus nodded. My kids saw this. The director met his gaze. So did everyone else. The family sat back down in row 18. Jamel whispered, Daddy, are we okay now? Marcus squeezed his hand. Yes. The plane finally pushed back. As it lifted into the air, Aisha looked out the window, chest aching. She hadn't wanted justice. She had wanted peace. But sometimes peace only came after someone refused to move. And somewhere behind them, far below, the ground grew smaller. The sky didn't care who was worthy. But people had to learn. All right. The plane climbed steadily, engines humming, with a low, constant force that pressed everyone back into their seats. Outside, clouds stretched endlessly, soft and indifferent, as if nothing ugly had happened below. Inside, nobody spoke. Row 18 felt heavier than before, as though the air itself remembered. Aisha wiped her face quietly, turning toward the window so her children wouldn't see the tears. She couldn't stop. Marcus stared straight ahead, jaw tight, shoulders squared. Like a man bracing for something he didn't know was still coming. People kept glancing at them, not the sharp, accusing looks from before. These were different, curious, guilty, supportive. Some looked away too fast. Others held eye contact for a second longer than necessary, as if trying to communicate something without words. I'm sorry. A woman leaned across the aisle and whispered, I should have spoken up earlier. Aisha nodded, managing a small smile. Thank you. The baby finally fell asleep, exhausted from crying. Jamay rested his head against Marcus's arm, fingers still curled tightly in his sleeve like he was afraid to let go. The seatbelt sign remained on. At the front of the cabin, a new flight attendant took the aisle, her movements careful, deliberate. She avoided looking toward row 18 at first, then finally did, offering a quiet nod. It wasn't much, but it felt intentional. Marcus exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. He thought it was over. He was wrong. 30 minutes into the flight, the intercom chimed again. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain said, his voice steady but unusually serious. "I need to address something before we continue service." The cabin stilled. "Earlier today," the captain continued, "a family on this flight was removed without just cause. That action does not reflect our values or our policies." A hush fell over the rows. "I want to personally apologize," he said, "and I want to be clear: discrimination of any kind will not be tolerated on this aircraft." A wave of murmurs followed. Some passengers nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably, as if the words were heavier than expected. Marcus felt Aisha's hand slip into his. The apology wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was public. And that mattered. Service resumed slowly. As carts rolled down the aisle, conversations picked up in fragments. Some people pretended nothing had happened. Others couldn't stop talking about it, replaying moments, dissecting tones, asking each other what they would have done. 2 rows ahead, a man whispered, "If that video hadn't gone viral, they wouldn't have cared." Marcus heard him. He didn't disagree. When the new attendant reached RO 18, she paused. "Would you like anything?" she asked, her voice gentle. Aisha hesitated, then nodded. "Water, please." "And for the kids?" the attendant asked. "Apple juice," Jamal said quietly. The attendant smiled. "Coming right up." When she returned, she placed the drinks carefully, then leaned closer. "I'm really sorry," she said softly. "For what happened?" Marcus looked at her. "Thank you." She straightened and moved on. It was a small thing, but small things added up. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Marcus finally let his guard drop just enough to feel the exhaustion crash into him. His hands shook faintly as adrenaline drained away. Aisha noticed. "You okay?" she whispered. He nodded, though he wasn't sure it was true. "I just keep thinking, what if we hadn't pushed back?" Aisha swallowed. "They would have taken us off. And that would have been the story." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "And the kids would have learned something else." Jamal stirred. "Learned what?" Marcus opened his eyes and looked at his son. "That sometimes," he said slowly, choosing each word, "people are wrong. And you're allowed to say so." Jamal thought about that, then nodded, satisfied. The plane landed hours later in a city buzzing with heat and noise, jet fuel and impatience. As passengers stood to retrieve bags, something unexpected happened. No one rushed. People waited. They let RO 18 stand first. A man stepped aside in the aisle. "After you," he said quietly. A woman smiled at Aisha. "Safe travels." One by one, the family moved forward. Not pushed, not rushed, not invisible. At the gate, more staff waited. The same regional director stood there, expression grave. "Mr. Johnson," he said. "May I have a moment?" Marcus nodded. "I want you to know," the director said, lowering his voice, "the employee involved has been removed from duty pending investigation." Aisha stiffened. "And?" Marcus asked. "And the footage is being reviewed at the highest level," the director continued. "There will be consequences." Marcus studied his face. "We didn't want revenge." "I know," the director said. "But accountability matters." Aisha shifted the baby on her shoulder. "Our kids were humiliated." The director nodded slowly. "And that matters too." He handed Marcus a card. "If you decide to pursue this further, call me directly." Marcus took it, unsure what he would do with it. As they walked away, Jamal looked back. "Daddy, are we famous now?" Marcus smiled faintly. "No, buddy, just seen." They didn't know yet that the video had crossed millions of screens, that comments were exploding, that news outlets were already calling it another example, another pattern, another story people were tired of pretending was rare. They didn't know the attendant's name was trending. They didn't know statements were being drafted, edited to soften. They only knew they were tired. That night, in their hotel room, Aisha finally broke down. She sat on the edge of the bed, shoulders shaking silently. "I hate that this keeps happening," she whispered. "I hate that we have to be strong all the time." Marcus sat beside her, pulling her close. "I know. I just wanted a normal trip," she said. "For once, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. I wanted that too. The kids slept nearby, unaware of headlines, unaware of arguments raging online about tone and compliance and context. Marcus stared at the ceiling long after Aisha's breathing evened out. He thought about the attendant's voice. Leave or I'll call security. He thought about how easily authority had been weaponized, how quickly discomfort became a threat. He wondered how many times it had worked before. In the morning, his phone buzzed endlessly. Messages, emails, requests. He ignored most of them. One message stood out, from a passenger. I didn't speak up when it happened. I should have. Watching you stand your ground made me realize how often silence helps the wrong side. Thank you. Marcus stared at the screen for a long time. Then he typed back, next time, say something. That's enough. He set the phone down. Outside, the city woke up, unaware of the small shift that had happened somewhere between a boarding pass and a refusal to move. It wasn't justice, but it was a crack. And sometimes, cracks were how light got in.